When the two hunters peered into the deep pit, they were shocked. They never expected to find something there that would change their understanding of the wild forever. What they discovered made them question who was truly the predator and who was the prey. Two seasoned hunters, Jason and Mike, noticed strange behavior from a gray wolf that persistently circled around one spot and then vanished into the forest, piquing their curiosity. As they approached closer, they saw the animal cautiously dropping something into a deep pit. Carefully nearing the edge, the men looked down and instantly recoiled, unable to believe their eyes. What they discovered at the bottom of the old trap compelled them to immediately drop their rifles and exchange glances of complete shock. In a quiet village surrounded by ancient forests, something unusual was happening, especially for those who claim that wild animals are mere creatures of instinct. Here lived an extraordinary elderly woman named Alice with her 11-year-old grandson, whose fate was marked by tragedy. From the outset, the boy, named Ben, lost his parents in a horrific car accident and was left in the care of his grandmother. A woman with an iron will and wisdom accumulated over decades of life among the woods. This remarkable elderly woman was a living legend among the locals. She never accepted modern medicine, preferring to heal using ancient knowledge of medicinal plants, which she meticulously passed on to her grandson. Every day she taught the boy not just to survive in the harsh nature, but also to respect every living creature he encountered. "Every animal has a soul and mind," she often said. "They just speak a different language." Fate decided to test these words in the most unexpected way. One spring morning, Alice suddenly lost consciousness. Returning from school, Ben found her lying on the ground, helpless and weak. Despite her fierce protests, he called the village doctor who, after examining her, insisted on immediate hospitalization. But proud Alice outright refused to leave her home. Instead, she gave her grandson a list of rare forest herbs, which, according to her, could bring her back to health better than any hospital medicine. With the first rays of the next morning, Ben set off into the forest, his heart filled with determination. He felt immense responsibility for the only close person he had left. Taking with him a flask of water and a bit of food, he ventured deep into the forest thicket, heading to places where he and his grandmother often gathered berries and herbs. Engrossed in his search for the necessary plants, the young man didn't notice the danger below. Suddenly, the ground deceitfully gave way, and he fell with a scream into a deep pit. It was an old hunting trap long forgotten, but it retained its deadly efficiency. The clay walls were too smooth and hard to grasp. Each attempt to climb out ended with a painful fall back to the bottom. Hours turned into days. Ben spent 3 agonizing days in the trap, shouting hoarsely, but only echo replied to his desperate cries for help. His food supplies quickly ran out, and he conserved water, taking tiny sips to last as long as possible. Hope slowly diminished in his heart, replaced by the cold realization of harsh reality. No one knew where to look for him, and his grandmother was too weak to organize a search. On the 4th day, when he was nearly out of strength, a strange rustle sounded above. Ben looked up, expecting to see a human face, but instead met the bright, curious eyes of a gray wolf. The animal watched him for a long time with almost human interest, then disappeared. The boy thought it was just a hallucination from exhaustion, but by evening, a piece of raw meat unexpectedly fell into the pit. Above stood the same wolf, observing as the hungry boy devoured the unexpected gift. This scene repeated over the next 2 days. The wild animal regularly brought food to the person in distress. Despite the meat being raw, Ben ate it gratefully, realizing it was the only thing keeping him alive. On the 7th day of confinement, when the last drops of water had been consumed and despair began to turn into indifference, the boy heard human voices. Faces of two hunters, Jason and Mike, appeared above the pit, showing extreme surprise. Jason and Mike, stunned by what they saw, swiftly lowered a rope into the pit. At the bottom, among bones and mud, they found not only an emaciated boy, but also fresh wolf tracks, and nearby, a neatly piled bundle of berries and roots, clearly gathered by no human hand. "You alive?" Mike rasped, helping Ben climb out. The boy, barely able to stand, nodded and pointed toward the bushes where a grey silhouette flickered. He fed me." The hunters exchanged glances. They knew this wolf, an old male with a scar on his flank, nicknamed Shadow by the village for his ability to vanish without a trace. But no beast would spend days caring for a child. Meanwhile, Ben, mustering his last strength, grabbed Jason's arm. "Grandma, she's alone, getting worse, the herbs," and passed out. Without hesitation, the men carried him to the village. On the way, Mike suddenly stopped. "Listen, what if Alice is right? What if the animals really—" "Not the time for philosophy," Jason cut him off sharply, though he himself stole a glance back at the forest. The village erupted into alarm. As the doctor revived Ben, Jason slipped quietly into the yard and froze. On the porch lay the very bundle of healing herbs the boy had been searching for. And in the distance, at the edge of the woods, sat the familiar grey shadow, as if waiting for confirmation that its task was done. A week later, thanks to a brew made from those very roots, Alice rose from her bed. And from then on, hunters began noticing something strange in the forest. The wolves no longer feared humans. They simply met their gaze as equals, and Jason, for the first time in his life, lowered his rifle. This story quickly spread throughout the entire region, changing the local hunters' attitudes toward forest dwellers. Many began to notice, in the behavior of animals, things they hadn't seen before: glimpses of intellect, emotions, and even compassion, qualities previously considered exclusively human. Ben and his grandmother often left treats at the forest's edge for their grey rescuer, which sometimes appeared in the distance as if checking to ensure everything was well with its human friends. This remarkable tale reminds us that there exist far more connections between living beings in the world than we can imagine, and sometimes our saviors come in the most unexpected forms, reminding us that kindness and compassion are languages understood by all living creatures on Earth. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.